I pointed out to you that in the New Testament, the word lonely occurs twice, and both times it does not refer to people, it refers to places. Lonely places. In Mark chapter 1 and verse 45, and in Luke chapter 15 and verse 16, it talks about lonely, but it's talking about the place where Jesus moved off into the wilderness all alone. He moved, but it was a lonely place. Then in Isaiah chapter 43, I love this in 1 through 5. Notice this. He says, "Do not be afraid. I will save you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the deep waters, I will be with you. Your troubles will not overwhelm you." I know they feel like they will, but God says, listen, your troubles will not overwhelm you. "When you pass through fire, you will not be burned. The hard trials that come will not hurt you. For I am the Lord your God. Because you are precious to me, and because I love you and give you honor, do not be afraid. I am with you." God is with us. Lay your hand on your chest. Say, God is with me. Say it again. God is with me. Say it once again. God is with me. I know it doesn't always feel like he's with you. But let me just tell you this. I have to remind you of this. Faith does not mean things will be easy. Faith means that it will be possible. Faith doesn't make things easy. Faith makes it possible. Faith makes it possible. Faith makes it possible. But God is with me. God is with me. There's certain things that you know, if God is not with me, there's no way in the world I could do this. I would have given up a long time ago. I would have lost my mind a long time ago. I couldn't do this unless God is with me. God is with me. I couldn't face this unless I knew God was with me. God's got me. God's got me. I mean, some of you are in situations where your mother and your father are already gone to glory. But the Bible says, when my mother and father forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. See, God will not leave you comfortless. He's got somebody. I mean, he's a loving father. He's a compassionate father. He's going to take care. He's so responsible. God is faithful. God is faithful. God is so faithful. And listen, this is the thing that I really love. God's love penetrates deep into our hearts so that we never, ever have to feel fully alone. His love penetrates us in such a way that you never, ever have to feel fully alone. You can be driving in the car and you say, Jesus, it's just me and you. You be walking around the house, Jesus, ain't nobody in it but me and you, Lord. Anybody ever been in a situation where you had to talk to the Lord, like he is your best friend? It's not because you're crazy. He is your friend. You know that he's there. You can feel his presence with you, and it's you having a hard time, and it's like, Jesus, you know what we gonna do? What we gonna do with this? Lord, help me help us, Jesus. Did you just hear what they said to me, Jesus? He has to be a constant friend and companion to you, and you got to talk to him like he's right there with you, like you love him and you're in love with him. Because he is with you. He said, I will never leave you. I am with you. I'm with you. I got your back. I'm standing in the midst of this. Talk to him. Talk to him. You feel like somebody has done you wrong? Unload on him. Unload on him. Unload on him. You know, he's already promised us, listen, that when you go through the waters, they're not going to overflow you. You walk through the fire, it's not going to burn you. He says, I'm with you. I got your back. I'm going to take you through this thing. You coming out of this on the other side. And it's because he is with us. He's with us. He is with us. And God says, my grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. My grace. My grace. How are we going to do this? My grace is sufficient. Where are we going to get the money? My grace is sufficient. Lord, you know the health of my body. You know what I'm dealing with. My grace is sufficient. Lord, you know the deadline that they gave me. My grace is sufficient. My grace. My grace. My grace. My grace. John chapter 14 and verse 18 in the English Standard Version, he says, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. I'm not going to leave you as an orphan. He says, listen, you are my child. You are my child. You are my child. You are my child to the degree that if somebody starts messing with you, it is better for them to put a millstone around their neck and tie it there and cast themselves in the midst of the sea than to offend one of these, my little one. God says, you mess with one of my children. Keep on messing with my child. Keep on acting up on my son. Keep on flipping out on my daughter. You're going to have me to deal with. You don't really, it's an awful thing. It's a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God. It really is. It really, really is. But then you begin to wonder what in the world can be done to overcome loneliness. What can be done? What I want you to realize as you ask this question, what can be done to overcome loneliness? And you may not be lonely, but you know somebody who is. But just understand this, that victory is always on the other side of inconvenience. Victory is always on the other side of inconvenience. It's on the other side of inconvenience, victory. That means that you've got to go through something that makes you uncomfortable, something that is not convenient. Victory is always on the other side of inconvenience. So what can be done to overcome loneliness? Listen, I would just say this very simply. Be a friend. Be a friend. Show yourself friendly. Be a friend. Show yourself friendly. I mean, it's better and it's easier when you got somebody with you. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, notice verse 9 through 12. Two are better than one. How many? Two. Two are better than one. Why? Because they have a good reward for their labor. Scientists have proven this. They have proven this by having one person in here assembling something and another person in the room assembling the same thing, and then see how much both of them can produce independently, and then they put both together and let them work as a team. It is more than double of what they could do alone. See, so they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. And again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. And that's why he says you need a cord. You don't need a whole lot of people, 2 or 3. Then he says that wherever there are 2, even 3 that are gathered together, just 2 or 3, just 2 or 3. You don't need a whole crowd of people. You start losing quality when the quantity gets too big. You don't need a whole lot of folks. You can't afford to have a whole lot of folks in your business anyway. Just 2 or 3, just 2 or 3, 2 or 3, 2 or 3. But now listen, if you ever find yourself feeling lonely, I want you to try these tips. Number 1, to pick up the phone and call someone. Just pick up the phone and call someone. And here's what you need to do. You need to make a list of who you can call. You can't call everybody. You need to make a list of who you can call if you ever need somebody. Make a list of who I can call if I'm lonely, if I get confused, if I want to hurt somebody, if I want to kill somebody, if I want to boil some grits. You need to have somebody that you can call. You need to be able to call somebody. Just start putting a list together. Pick up the phone and call somebody. Pick up the phone and call somebody. Here's number 2. You're feeling lonely. Send a card to someone. Send a card to someone. Could I tell you one thing you could do? You could write somebody who's incarcerated. You could write somebody who's sick and shut in. You don't know how much that would make that day to get a card from somebody. You take the time to actually send a card to somebody. And this will help you if you're lonely. If you're lonely. Here's number 3, visit someone. Visit someone, especially people that might be homebound, somebody that might be in a nursing home, convalescing. Visit someone. It'll bless you. And number 4, volunteer with an organization. Volunteer. You see, here's the principle. By taking your mind off of self and onto others, you'll soon realize how very beneficial it is. Just by taking your mind off of self and then putting it on to others. You know why? Because you were placed here to serve other people. You're placed here to love. To love. Love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. That we're put here to express the love of God to people. What is life without love? Who wants to be alive if nobody loves you? Love is life. God is love. In the absence of love, there is no living. There is no life. It is death if you don't feel loved. That's why when somebody loves you and they hurt you, it feels like they put a dagger in your heart and twisted it. because the absence of love produces death. And then you think about some of the loneliest people in the world are widows. And you might ask the question, is there help for widows? Is there help for widows? 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 5 says, now she who is really a widow and left alone trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. It's interesting that many widows were given a real ministry of intercession because God was their friend. He was their companion. If you're widowed and alone, put your trust in God. Put your trust in God. Talk to Him about your loneliness and let Him even know your heart's desires. You know, it is assumed that the woman Dorcas or Tabitha, that she was a widow. And when she was raised from the dead, they brought the saints and the widows to her. You know why? Because she was a widow. She was a widow. I want you to notice the story in Acts chapter 9, verse 36. Notice. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. To me, Tabitha sounds so much better than Dorcas. I'm like, you know, if your name is Dorcas, I mean, just call me Tabitha. I'm sorry, you know. But the Bible says that she was full of good works and acts of charity. And in those days, she became ill and died. Now notice, she was full of good works and acts of charity. You know why? She was a widow. And in those days, she became ill and died. And when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. And since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, please come to us without delay. And so Peter rose up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upper room, and the widows stood beside him weeping. Notice the widows showed up. You know why? Because she was a widow. She was a widow. And so other widows came there weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas, let's call her Tabitha, made while she was with them. That's what Tabitha made. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed, and turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. I'm glad he didn't call her Dorcas. I'm so glad he didn't call her Dorcas. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and widows, notice that, he presented her alive. So the widows said, you know what, this is one of our homegirls. This Tabitha. Girl, you heard Dorcas done died. Dorcas is dead. No, child, don't tell me Dorcas is dead. And so they gather around her burial place, and you know, and Peter comes there and speaks life back into it and says, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes and came back alive. And here were the saints and the widows. They were widows. They had a fellowship. You don't have to do life alone. You don't have to do life alone. You don't have to do life alone. Remember Psalm 68, verse 5 and 6, a father of the fatherless, a defender of widows. Notice that God says, I got your back. A defender of widows is God in his holy habitation. God sets the solitary or the single person in families, and he brings out those who are bound into prosperity, but the rebellious dwell in a dry land. Well, what can lonely people do to help change their feelings of loneliness? What in the world can they do? Here's what I would say. Number one, admit the problem. I mean, you know, just admitting the problem is half of it right there. A problem well defined is a problem half solved. Most people are in denial. You cannot help people as long as they're in denial. You can't help them. You know, if somebody tells you, you know, I don't have a problem. I could quit drinking when I just drink, you know, because I just like to have a good time every now and then, you know. And if they're in denial over the fact that they have a problem with alcohol, you can't help them as long as they're in denial. Their denial is their way of saying to you, I'm not ready to change. I'm not ready to change. So admit the problem. Only after you acknowledge that you're lonely can you take the necessary steps to even be able to come away from that isolation. Here's number 2, consider the causes. What has caused me to be withdrawn? Is it because I feel inadequate? If I feel that I don't communicate well? Am I an introverted personality and I just don't necessarily like being around a lot of people? What's the real cause of this? Have I been hurt? Have I been traumatized? Did I get close to somebody and they betrayed me and now I'm afraid to get close to people and let them into my world? You have to consider the causes, evaluate your life honestly in the light of some of the factors that we mentioned earlier. Then number 3, accept what cannot be changed. Accept what cannot be changed. You know, some people have gone into loneliness because of the death of a spouse. Well, you can't change that. A relocation away from friends, whatever. You can't necessarily do anything about that. If your job has moved you from away from your friends or they moved away from you, other unalterable circumstances, they have to be faced squarely. You have to just accept the things that you cannot change. Just accept it. Just accept it. And then number 4, alter what can be changed. Alter what can be changed, because many of the causes of loneliness, as we have discussed before, can be overcome. There are certain things that you can intentionally do. And if you are suffering or know somebody who's suffering with loneliness, here are a few suggestions. Now, if you don't need this, you might know somebody who does. Direct your thinking outwardly to others rather than thinking excessively about yourself. You see, reach up, pick up the telephone and call and cheer somebody else out. You know, you'd be surprised. I was born to give encouragement and to lift other people. No matter how old I get, I'll find somebody to encourage. It's just in my life. And you know what? I'll feel better if I make somebody else feel better. Even if you weren't feeling so hot yourself. But if you help somebody else, you get blessed. If you lift somebody else, you get lifted in the process. You'd be surprised. Determine that you can control your own attitudes and emotion. You have to determine that you can control your own attitudes and emotion. Just remember, ask God, for His spirit of love and joy, for the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22. Ask God for just to help you to realize that and for those things to be further developed in your life. Just realize that you can mature fruit that's in your life. Here's another simple thing. Just be friendly, smile, laugh. Be friendly, smile, laugh. Positive actions and emotions are contagious. They are absolutely contagious, and they will encourage other people to even want to be around you. There's a word for that. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24. Go to church and church activities and then fellowship with others. Get in a small group. In a discipleship group where you can do life with other people. Consider the needs of other people and try to encourage them and uplift them. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25, 1 John chapter 1, verse 3. Participate in various activities. Participate. Be involved with other people. Here's a great thing if people are lonely. Adopt a pet from a shelter. I remember when my grandfather died, my grandmother, she was still kicking. My grandmother lived another 22 years after my granddaddy died. And my brother took her a cat down there, help her through the grieving. Special Siamese cat, a Persian, I don't know what it was, some type of exotic cat. And it took her mind off of it to help her in the transition of the death of her husband for more than 50-something years of marriage. And so after that cat had helped her through that transition period, she said, all right, that's enough of this. She said, you can come and get your cat now. After she got rid of those cats, she lived another 21 years. She was 97 when she went home to be with the Lord. She said, you can have this. But adopt a pet. You'd be surprised. I'm just telling you, if it's storming outside and if you just got a dog or a cat, I'm just telling you, it just makes you feel like a person is in the house with you. Have you ever been home alone and you start hearing some creaking and screeching going on in your house and you're like, well, what was that? It really does help you if you have a cat or dog, a goldfish, a bird or something. It's like, it really does. adopt a pet. I mean, it's a great idea that they can really be friends. I didn't understand what people, I would see people driving around town, sitting with the dog in the car like it was one of the children, and they can really be pretty good companions. I grew up with cats and dogs, so I'm very comfortable with them, very, very comfortable. But volunteer your services to others. Volunteer your services to others. I mean, there are various volunteer opportunities, programs at hospitals, at schools, at libraries, at prisons. And consider visiting a convalescent home, a nursing home, to cheer up the patients. And soon you'll have a totally different perspective about loneliness. Here's another strategy. Learn new things. Learn new things. Develop a new hobby. Expand your interests. Engage in conversations, with others about current events and common interests. You'll be surprised how, as you learn new things, it just helps to bring you out of that feeling. And then use technology to be in touch. Use technology to be in touch. So when properly used, the internet can be an amazing blessing for communication and interaction with other people. People are FaceTiming and, going into kinds of things when their relatives live across the country, and they can see their people and interact with them, and hey baby, they hear your voice, they see your gestures and your expressions and all of that, and you can email, you can Facebook, you can Twitter, and you can do all kinds of things. And you can make it fun. So it makes it where somebody is connected to you, even if it's in cyberspace. And then establish a circle of friends that you can talk to on the telephone. And this can help you. And this is what I said, make your list out before you need them. Make your list so that you'll know. And ask about it. Other folks that may be sick or shut in, and use that. And every day you can help brighten somebody else's day, and it'll lift you in the process. And listen, if you have a deep loneliness and depression, and you can't seem to pull out of it, please seek help through professionals. Get some real professional counseling. You might need some help. And there are some cases of depression and other medical conditions that can actually put a person into a depressed kind of an isolation, and they may need some professional help or sometimes medication to help reset chemicals in the body that can get off balance. But some depression in your life can actually come from your inability to see your next season. And when you have blindness about where God is calling you, some of it, the isolation, because I don't know, God, what you're doing next. It is very common that when God is going to take you to another level, and when He's trying to get breakthrough to come up in your life, God will isolate you. And if you can't see what God is doing, you can get messed up in your perspective because you cannot see your next step, your next move. And why, God, have you left me here? You have forsaken me here on this level, and God has got something. But see, what happens is that we become so fixated on where we've been, and that we fail to see where He's taken us. And so you have to realize that in the midst of everything that I'm dealing with, that God, you didn't make me to just stay here. You made me for more than this. This earth is not my home. I'm on my way somewhere. I'm on my way somewhere. I'm coming out of the place where I am. I'm moving into something that is far better than this. If you don't realize that you're not forsaken, it's oftentimes that we just don't see our next step. God, where are you taking me? What are you doing, God? And because He has us in the dark about it, we become disillusioned, and we feel as though He's forgotten about me. He's forgotten about me. May I remind you of something? God has not forgotten about you. He says, I've written your name on the back of my hands. I know you. I know you. I know you. I know all of my children. God knows all 7 billion plus folks in the world. He knows us all. If He knows the sparrow, I mean, a little bird, a tiny bird, as many of them as there are, if he knows the number of hairs on your head. See, you have to remember God is omniscient. He knows you. He knows what you're dealing with. And God specializes in being able to take things that are a pain to us, and out of our pain, we find a place of ministry, and a place of comfort, and a place of healing. And it's amazing that in your serving your gift to other folks, you get healed in the process. That's why when you minister to somebody, if you're lonely, you come out of your loneliness. If you encourage somebody else who's discouraged, you become encouraged. You see, you really do literally reap what you sow. And whatever it is that you need in your life, sow it into the life of another. Whatever you need, sow it into the life of another. Whatever you need, sow it into the life of another. And you'll be surprised how your life can be transformed when you really trust yourself to God and realize the Lord's with me. He's never going to leave me or forsake me. And so when you ask the question, when you feel God forsaken, is anybody there? God, do you hear me? Because I've been talking and nothing has changed. And you assume that nobody's there, that God is not listening to you. And he says, you know what, how can I forget you? How can I forget you? He hears you. And God says, I'm with you. And I've got something prepared for you. And I have not seen, neither hath ear heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man, the things that God has prepared for those that love him. When you love God, and if you don't get discouraged to the degree that you allow it to bring such a disappointment in you that it makes you unfaithful where you are, you'll be surprised what God will do. God will blow your mind. He will blow your mind. He is awesome. He'll exceed your expectation. You know why? Because he's able to do exceedingly, abundantly, and even above all that you could ask or even think. God will throw some stuff in there that you didn't even think to ask. I'm just telling you, he's that kind of God. God says, I got your name on the back of my hands. I know you. I'll never, ever leave you nor forsake you. God says, I got your back.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Join us again next time for Power for Living, where revelation is power. Power for living.